Myles Turner is not a Pacer. He is gone. He is going to a division rival. What now? What else needs to be made of this? What other players do the Pacers need to look at? We'll talk about all of that today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday / Wednesday / whatever day this is coming out, because time is lost for me. And welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes. And today, Myles Turner, more chatter on the shocking free agency departure hitting the Pacers. I did a quick reaction breakdown of this yesterday. So if this is your first time downloading a Locked On Pacers episode since Tuesday, go check that out for an initial, what possibly could have happened here. What does this mean for the Pacers? Oh my gosh, he's going to be playing against them 4 times a year. What is going on here? And then a little bit at the end of sprinkled in targets. Today we'll get a little more focused on the pivot for the Pacers, but I do have a couple more thoughts on where I just reading tea leaves and being around the NBA for a while. I have thoughts on what might have happened here. I don't know anything. No one is being very specific about anything right now, and for good reason. Everybody needs leverage and negotiating power and wants to, keep things to themselves for one reason or another. However, Myles Turner is not a Pacer. He is with the Bucks. Since that announcement from Shams that it was 4 for $107, player option, trade kicker of the works. First of all, that's over $27 million a year, and everybody's like, you said he'd get 30. Yeah, that's $3 million away, and he got a trade kicker and a player option. That's basically 30. Secondly, that's a lot over 4 years. A lot for a player worthy of that money, as I argued all summer, but still a lot. And reporting from various different places, Alex Golden is setting the pace, said well north of $20 million per year. Greg Doyle in Indy Star said 4 for $95, concrete terms. Spencer Davies in RG Media said $22 million per year. And he that report even said he would have stayed with Indiana at $25 million a year, which is interesting because Greg Doyle's report was that they offered 4 for $95, which is so close. That seems so materially close that it would get done. So here's thing one to say. No one is, they're all different. People from all corners of this exchange are saying different things. We obviously know the details of what the Bucks claim to have signed him as. You never know if there's any partial guarantees at the end, how this is going to go. I will say this. From just history of NBA stuff that is surprising or dramatic, money is a usually high up factor in why things shifted. And so if I had to guess, let me be clear, guess right now what the driver was creating a difference that led to Turner potentially leaving, money is usually the answer. The Pacers obviously have the tax to think about. They should be willing to either pay it or move someone else to not. To me, obviously they disagreed, or else I think he'd still be on the team, given how close some of this reporting sounds. That is just opinion. That is not reporting. However, a lot of different numbers being thrown out from lots of different people. But we know what he agreed on. We know what was enough for him. And we know the Pacers situation well enough to know that these seem close-ish to me. I would have thought the offers might be a little higher than they ended up being, but I get it. Alas, this is where it goes for the Pacers. So the other part of this that I wanted to talk about is what now? Because to me, one of the reasons this could have gone into day 1.5 to whatever you want to call it, July 1st of free agency. Technically, free agency for the Pacers started the day after the finals. Really, it starts for the whole league on the 30th, and then July 1st is day 2, whatever you want to call it, right? Is usually bigger stuff gets done early. And this didn't. And I surmised at the time that, other stuff dried up. They were probably negotiating, and I assumed he'd come back to the Pacers. He did not. Knowing now that he is with a different team, I do wonder if night 1, early morning, day 2, whatever, for the Pacers, pre the Bucks, dumping Pat Connaughton, waving, stretching Lillard, all this crazy stuff to get the space for Turner, pre-knowing that opening was available and willing to offer that money for Turner, if there was potentially the Pacers and Turner working through sign and trade possibilities, and then it got to this point, because that seems like what step 2 would have been. Sign and trades are tricky. but you just never know. That to me seems like what the natural path would have been. Again, all guessing, but this is just being around the league for a while and what logically makes sense for both parties. And if the Bucks appear out of nowhere and they're offering a great deal, you got to take it. Player option's a huge deal for somebody at age 29. 15% trade kicker is awesome. Fully guaranteed is awesome. So that's just some scattered thoughts that I didn't get into the first show about how this could have gotten to this point. Reading the tea leaves of reports that are all close but not quite agreeable, and we do know what he actually agreed on. They're not that far off, right? A 4 for $95 deal, as Greg Doyle reported. A year one salary there is not that high, right? It's $21.2 million. That would have taken the Pacers slightly into the tax, sure. Like, that's so easy to get under. It's one guy you have to trade or one little stretch or something. Like, it's not that unreasonable to have to do that. It's not fun to have to trade anybody, but it's not unreasonable, right? Maybe they were looking ahead to their future situations. People keep saying, "Oh, they would have gone over the apron." Like, no, that's not that hard to avoid either. It's so close to the line that there's always something you can do. If you don't like the value of trades you're getting there, I don't know. I'm very still surprised that this is how this ended, alas. So part two of what I'm trying to get to is, if they explored sign and trades, let's talk about that now, because they're not trading him anywhere else. He agreed to terms with the Bucks, and he can, because of all these moves the Bucks made, he can just go there, right? Myles Turner can just sign there, and that's the end. So to talk about this, I'm going to have to talk about Ricky Rubio, believe it or not, ex-Pacer Ricky Rubio. So we'll get there. So here's something that I now wonder. Would the Pacers be willing to give the Bucks a small asset to help the Pacers get a big old trade exception? So here's how that would work. If you trade out salary for less salary or salary for no salary, you get a trade exception that lasts, if you're over the cap the whole time, for a whole year of time. And you can use that to take in a player who fits into that. The Hawks just used a trade exception created by trading DeJounte Murray to bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That's what they're going to do, right? So they traded DeJounte Murray. They took back way less salary in that trade, right? Dyson Daniels, and they did some other stuff because they had a trade exception from John Collins, but whatever. The point being, they had a big trade exception so they could take in Nickeil Alexander-Walker while being over the cap and not using the MLE on him, right? So what could happen is the Pacers could sign and trade Turner into the Bucks cap space for nothing in return. So the Pacers would then get this big trade exception that allows them to do what the Hawks did and have a full calendar year to, in theory, use that exception themselves to bring in a player who would make what Turner's outgoing salary would be. The year one of that looks like it's going to be in the $24 million to $25 million range. Pending structure, because using cap space means I guess I have to say pending structure. So that is all true. However, the Bucks are in the Pacers division. They're rivals. Why on earth would they just give the Pacers this trade exception? They could just sign Myles Turner. They could just do that, right? Why would they help in this situation? And so that's where I just wonder if that trade exception has enough value to the Pacers in a 1-year time period. Because remember, it only lasts for 1 calendar year. If it would have enough value to the Pacers just because of its sheer size, if the Pacers would be willing to give up a crappy second round swap to get it. But if you're the Bucks, again, is that enough for you to do that? They aren't exactly asset rich, maybe so. But I wonder if that could be where this goes from here. That's just a hunch as a possibility for the Pacers, because then in theory, you can open up more possibilities. That trade exception would be much bigger than the non-tax mid-level exception or a Tyrese Haliburton disabled player exception, and that would give the Pacers a full year to have more flexibility to add a player that is talented in that level. They could trade away. I'm not suggesting this is just an example of money. Jarris Walker for a $24 million player, and it's a legal trade. You don't have to salary match, right? So it helps another team. It could help another team financially. So I wondered if this was possible a few years ago. The Pacers had Ricky Rubio and his whatever version of bird rights they had on him. We learned that Ricky Rubio was going to the Cavs. He fit into a trade exception that the Cavs had at the time from someone else. I wondered if that would be a sign and trade that would open an exception for the Pacers. The Cavs never tangoed in those negotiations, I believe is how that was described to me a long time ago. And so there was no trade exception created. Similar situation, in division, player on the Pacers, going to another team. They could do exactly what they're doing here, and it didn't happen, right? And a lot of times it doesn't happen. Why would it, right? Why would the Bucks help the Pacers without incentive? And so it's obviously the next step for the Pacers is it's worth exploring what the asset price is for the Bucks to do that, right? These teams have made significant trades before. Remember Malcolm Brogdon and ownership involvement there with picks going out in a sign and trade, right? That was Horst. That was this Pacers front office. You never know. But in-division trades are atypical, right? And so we will see where this goes. But that is the, I think, final thing to watch on this is how is it just straight up Myles Turner, see ya? Or is there another element to this that gives the Pacers a year of more flexibility and optionality, stuff that they love to talk about? What do the Pacers do now? That's part of it. Why do the numbers matter? How does this all fit in to their current reality? And who on earth is going to be their center? Is it really going to be internal candidates? That wouldn't be the worst thing, but is that what it's going to be? So much more to talk about on today's Locked On Pacers podcast. Before we do that, we got to talk about Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. In addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. So many things you can check out with Monarch Money that can help you see that you're spending too much on something. It could surprise you. There'll be specific categories on there that you can see, like subscriptions or takeouts. Oh man, is that more than I thought? Is that less than I thought? Everything you need in one app to manage your money day to day. And if you share your finances with somebody, hello, there you go. Shared accounts right on there. You can set goals. So many ways to better manage your finances, all right there on the app. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com. You'll get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off of your first year. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day, or second listen. Of course, Locked On Bucks. I think they have had 2 episodes out now since this happened. The first one was just like, whoa, they got Myles Turner. The second one was like, wait, they waived and stretched Dame and they traded Pat Connaughton and they might lose Ryan Rollins. And what is all going on here? Locked On Bucks. We'll have more. Woo, doozy of a day. More to wrap up the cap stuff with just the money the Pacers have right now for Turner, for the 10 players they have under contract, plus Tony Bradley's non-guaranteed deal. I have them $19.7 million from the tax right now. That is with no starting center, no Isaiah Jackson money, no Cam Jones money, and no potentially. This is the only thing that could benefit is they might now have enough room to have a full 15-man roster and bring in another veteran point guard to kind of be a table setter this season. People might say, development year. Okay, then find like a younger guy to do it. But like you need quality point guard play to help players develop. I always believe it's so hard to develop in chaotic systems, even if it's a development year. They have good point guards now, but you need more in case they get hurt. They could, in theory, afford that now. So they have enough room if they do. If Tony Bradley ends up on what his minimum would be, and then they give a minimum to that point guard. Cam Jones is at like $1.8 million. They'd have like 16 point something million for a combination of Isaiah Jackson and their last player, if that's a center, if that's whatever. So that is, I'd assume, because they gave Isaiah Jackson this qualifying offer, that he is getting more than the minimum. And my assessment of what his free agency could look like is very wrong. In fact, from other people who hit me up from around the league who were surprised he got the qualifying offer, offers would have been there for him over the minimum. So I suspect he will get over the minimum. Exactly what, who knows? So that if he does, even if he got the minimum, that would cut into it. So I'd suspect the Pacers now can use about 10 to 12 million of their non-tax mid-level to acquire someone. They could trade for somebody in that range. They could sign somebody for that kind of money. If it's a stopgap center for a year, if it's trading for somebody who makes that much or less in year one and they have a longer deal, they can do that. There's a lot of ways to do it, but that is their new financial reality. I suspect now with they do not have bird rights, sign anybody right now, unless they get a trade exception in the future, for more than that non-tax mid-level amount, right? There is just no actual literal way for them to do that outside of Isaiah Jackson because they have full bird rights on him. And I think there's no way he'll get, much more, if any, than his qualifying offer. In fact, an example player, by the way, that happened today, Trey Mann had his qualifying offer declined by the Hornets. He went into unrestricted free agency, but then he signed a 3-year deal that was basically his qualifying offer times 3, but the first year value was less. Helps the Hornets with some flexibility, gives him a chance to grow. I will assume on that contract there's some partial or non-guarantees on the back end. That could be a reasonable structure for Isaiah Jackson, 3 for 15 or something, 3 for 12. His was $6 million. I don't think that 3 for 18 that seems a little high to me, but perhaps that's where he'll end up, like 3 for 18, and it starts at $5 million, something like that. Regardless, that's a consideration here. Assuming he gets what you'd expect, no one else on the Pacers can get that more than that non-tax mid-level, and so they really can't go too far into the tax at all. Anyway, the aprons are not really a thing to consider unless they make trades or unless they get that trade exception for Turner, like I said. So under that assumption, once we know the Isaiah Jackson number or deal, I think the thing for the Pacers to look out for then is the tax line would basically become a hard cap for them. I mean, obviously that seems like a factor with Turner, but alas, that is their current up to the minute cap projection for me. I suspect Tony Bradley's number will get a little smaller at some point, although, I did talk about the trade flexibility that provides. That actually has more tangible value now than it did at the time I said it. But regardless, that is the current reality of the Pacers' financial situation. So 17 minutes in to this recording. A lot of that will be cut out because I've coughed a bunch. So if you've seen cuts on YouTube, I'm sorry. So what now happens? They clearly do not have they don't have Tony Bradley's the only center on the team, and he's not starter quality. He played fine in the playoffs. Like if he was on their roster next year, I would totally get it. But he's not a starting level player. He's maybe a backup level player, but I think the Pacers would like to have a more stable talent there. If they keep Isaiah Jackson, that's fine. Like here, I've had to say this so many times because people really conflate cap analysis with player analysis. And in a lot of ways, they are linked, right? When you discuss if a contract is good or bad, you're actually talking about if the player is as good as their contract, right? Every cap discussion is kind of a talent discussion. Isaiah Jackson is good. I quite like Isaiah Jackson. Somebody was talking to me recently because during the rookie seasons of Isaiah Jackson and Chris Duarte, I said to them during a game, I think Isaiah Jackson's going to be better than Chris Duarte, which seemed crazy at the time. It turned out to be true just by complete luck. I did not think it would happen this way. However, I think Isaiah Jackson is good. I just don't know how good he's going to be after an Achilles injury, given how much he relies on his athleticism. But I still think he's good. He's totally worth developing. He's a restricted free agent. Very high chance to me, given all those factors, that he would be back on the team in some capacity. Is that who the Pacers want their starting center to be? I mean, he's certainly talented, right? Maybe give it a shot and see what that type of player looks like. But there are certainly risks to that. And their confidence level in him long-term will be telling with how they handle the rest of the center position, though, right? If they sign someone else good, clearly they view Jackson as a long-term backup, right? That seemed like the plan this year. Have Jackson be the backup. That was the case in the 5 games that he played. It was Turner and then Jackson with Wiseman as the third guy was probably going to be the case by all the tea leaves of preseason and the 1 game that Wiseman played. So that would be my suspicion for what they want and from what we've seen from him. But, I mean, given their current roster situation, perhaps they look at him. The only 2 free agents that I would consider starting quality free agent centers out there right now, there's only 2. Al Horford, and he can't play that much per game at his age. And obviously Ayton is like the 20-something best center in the league. Puts up huge stats, but, is not a huge on-off impact guy and has some great games and some rough games. He's a fine player. The Pacers have had interest in him before, so you're going to hear his name a lot until he makes a decision. I believe he's now cleared waivers. It might be the 3rd. I don't know the exact date his waiver went through. No one can claim him on waivers. He's going to be a free agent. So he is a name to watch, but outside of those 2, the other options for the Pacers would be trades. And trades make a lot of sense just because they could get an actual starting, like good starting quality center, right? Someone potentially better than Ayton or Al Horford, or perhaps you, opinionated listener, think there's another free agent center out there who is starting caliber. I do not happen to think so myself, but there are other, at least serviceably good players. So I ran through a list of what I would consider I could see how this guy would be available center that either, importantly, as we'll talk about, makes the MLE or less, or makes more and would require the Pacers sending somebody away, but is good enough that they should at least sniff around, and I would understand why they're available. Let's go a little deeper on potential Pacers center, trade, or acquisition targets. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making me your first listen today and every single day. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander signed a contract that has an $80 million season at the end of it. Locked On Thunder will have more on a massive deserved contract. The Kings made some moves. They got Dennis Schroeder and Drew Eubanks. Locked On Kings will have some big stuff. The Bucks, obviously, were the big ones of the day. The Nuggets look awesome now. Locked On Nuggets is a good place to go. During free agency, if you want to learn about what these teams are doing and how their team looks, Locked On has local experts everywhere. Okay, so let's start with this. I said this on the Turner show yesterday. A reminder again, this is fairly new and hasn't happened a ton in like a hugely meaningful way. It has happened some, but in like smaller ways. In the new CBA, mid-level exceptions or cap exceptions can be used as trade exceptions. So if a player makes an exception amount or less, they can be traded to another team into their mid-level. So the Pacers, by having, in theory, their full non-tax mid-level, probably practically a little bit less, depending what happens with Cam Jones and some other guys. It's close to their full tax, basically, or excuse me, their full non-tax. They can trade for a player making $14.1 million or less and just take that player in without sending out other salary, right? That is allowed. So that immediately is where my eyes wander when I search through free agents. Is like, who is good, possibly available, like for a reason that isn't just like, I think he's a good player, and would not be so expensive for the Pacers to acquire. I ran through some of these names yesterday as just kind of a brief thing. I'll talk a little bit more about how they could be available today. Let me be clear before I do this. I kind of hate doing this exercise most years. Like, I obviously think about who the Pacers could acquire all the time, but I just hate the idea of just like basically being like, they could trade for this player, they could sign this guy. Like, you could say that about anyone, right? If you happen to like or dislike a player, you could just say that about anyone. So that's why these targets are not players that I'm not going to talk about how good I think they are today. I'm just strictly today talking about why, from a salary cap perspective and the situation of the team that this player is on, I could see why they would be available as an option for the Pacers. For example, last December, when the Pacers were completely tax strapped and in a weird spot where they needed a third center after losing Moses Brown, I said, let's run through some minimum guys who could be available given their situation. One of those names was Thomas Bryant, right? It made sense for the Heat to want to get off his money for very little to nothing. And the Pacers needed somebody, and he's clearly decent. He's on a guaranteed contract. It made sense and looked at. It's exactly what happened. You can go back and listen to that. So we'll try to do that here, and I will explain. I'll admit at some points it's a bit of a stretch, but I have lots of names, and I'm going to talk about these guys a lot. Okay, number one, and a guy that I think is pretty high. I have four names that I think are the most effective or reasonable here. Number one that I'm the most interested in is Orlando Magic starting center Wendell Carter Jr., whose contract is a little over $10 million for the 2025-26 season. Then an extension starts, and his contract jumps up $8 million. Maybe the Pacers don't like that part of it next year and the following years, but getting a guy who's under contract for a while is good. Wendell Carter is a decent player who they could, again, get in their mid-level exception. And the Magic, on one hand, he might start at center. And then this is just a complete non-starter. Why would they trade Wendell Carter? On the other hand, they have Goga. They might have Mo Wagner if they want to bring him back and reunite him with his brother. Jonathan Isaac plays center for them sometimes. And Wendell Carter gets more expensive next year, which maybe is fine, but he gets more expensive as the team does. Banchero's going to get expensive next year. Franz, they just got Bane in the door. Jalen Suggs' extension is now a thing. So there's a chance that they evaluate their financial reality and say, if we can get off Wendell Carter now and use some other cheaper centers, that'd be awesome. He's good, though. He's a good player, and he fits well enough with their team that I would totally understand if you're like, what are you talking about? Why would he be available? But I think given their financial situation and the other centers they have on their team, especially if Mo Wagner returns, that's an interesting one. Robert Williams, I brought him up yesterday, kind of offhand, funnily enough, with Ayton getting bought out there. Maybe this is less of a thing after that. He would fit in the mid-level exception. He's a little over $13 million, very injury-prone player. They drafted Klingon last year. They drafted Young this year. They have Dwap Reith on that team. Dwap Reith was a guy, by the way, that was in that minimum salary conversation with Thomas Bryant last year. So they have three other centers already. And Mitchell Robinson's on an expiring contract. What kind of value does he have to the Portland Trailblazers, right? That's a guy that they could kick the tires on. I don't think this player would be available. He's quite good. He had a good playoffs. Mitchell Robinson's contract descends into this year. It's expiring. He makes now less than the mid-level exception. In theory, the Pacers could trade for him without sending any salary out in return. And the Knicks just signed Yabusele. So they have Cat, they have Yabu, they have and they have Mitchell Robinson. How are they playing Yabusele? They clearly wanted him. They gave him a player option. Well, the answer could just be that they want to play Cat at the 4, like lots of teams have done, and like Cat's done for a lot of his career. This seems like it could be very simple, but if Yabu wants to play the 5, if that makes the most sense for the Knicks, did they think about it, especially with Mitchell Robinson being expiring? That is a little bit of a stretch, even I'll admit it. Walker Kessler, I'll first of all say this. He's entering the last year of his rookie deal. Seems just very Pacers-y, right? They get the young guy on the rookie skill deal, evaluate them. He'd be extension eligible this summer. That probably wouldn't make sense after a trade, but then they could re-sign him next year, right? They've done that kind of stuff before, getting guys on rookie deals for forever. They got Obi Toppin after the 3rd year of his rookie scale contract, for example. That worked out quite well for him. Why would Walker Kessler be available? He's good and he's cheap. That is all true. He is on the Jazz, who just hired a new lead decision maker of their basketball ops, and they have Kyle Filipowski, and they might have Micah Potter, and they have Yusuf Nurkic, and they have John Collins. They have lots of money in the center spot. They have lots of centers. Nurkic and Collins expire, so they don't have any long-term money concerns if they want to keep Kessler, but they have lots of centers right now. And if they start to pay him, like, are they going to be good while they're paying him? Does he perfectly line up with their timeline? He probably does, but he has been speculated enough as being available for so long that it's interesting. Trading with the Jazz can be challenging, so I'd be interested about that one, but that is because he's on a rookie deal, very Pacers-y. Let's bounce around some less awesome players, but still interesting names that could be available. Mo Wagner, see the reasoning for Wendell Carter Jr. earlier. Mo Wagner's quite good. He was paid $10 million last year. I believe he's just straight up an unrestricted free agent, actually, who had a team option. I have him in the wrong section here. Excuse me. He's a free agent. His team option got declined. So don't count him as a trade. The Pacers could just sign him. He has been a strong, bruising, good center off the bench for the Magic for a while. Is he starter level? Maybe not, but he's pretty good. Brandon Clark, Tony Crush level player. Is he actually available? Don't know. The Grizzlies are getting more expensive after this Jaren thing. He's on a transitioning team. His contract is kind of he's hurt all the time. Do the Grizzlies really want him? But would the Pacers want an injured player who maybe can't play the 5? Who knows? These next 3 or 4 are all players that I'm counting. Well, one is not, but 3 of the next 4 guys fall into the category of they're a decent to good player on a team that is not very good, and those kind of players can be available. And these guys all make less than the mid-level as well. Kelly Olynyk just got traded to the Wizards from the Pelicans. Do the Wizards actually want Kelly Olynyk? They have Alex Sarr and other bigs on their team. Maybe. Like, he's a good vet. He can stretch the floor. Having valuable floor spacing can help young guys, but the decent players on bad teams, especially on non-expensive contracts, typically can be available for very little. Could help the Pacers in that way. Jalen Smith, ex-Pacer, 2 years left on his deal with the Bulls. Not a very good team. Decent player. Could he be available? They know he fits. He's played well for them in the past. I have Goga on this list, another ex-Pacer. I put C Magic guys, right, because I talked about Mo Wagner and Wendell Carter and maybe not Jonathan Isaac, but he's in the mix for their center rotation there. But he's talked about wanting to kick the Pacers' butt in the past in those games against them. That just doesn't seem as Pacers-y of a move, but he's obviously improved quite a bit since they moved on from him. And then Nick Richards, Mark Williams, and Malawach went to the Suns. He's now their 3rd center. He's a decent player. He's on a cheapo deal. And it's already been reported as a connection from Michael Scotto. So he makes the Sixers as well. So that is the crew of guys that makes the MLE or less, meaning it would be very easy to salary match for them in trades without sending out anyone of serious consequence or note as the Pacers. There's some guys above the MLE that I'm at least like rubbing my chin going, on their futures in their current situation. Not to say they should be available, but these players that I'm about to say, in the absence of a Myles Turner trade exception, money would have to go out. Matching salary would have to exist to make this trade happen. I mentioned this guy yesterday, Onyeka Okongwu, good player. The Hawks just got Kristaps Porzingis, like a not maligned, that's the wrong word, but used less often than I think his talent level is center. This is a little bit more in my opinion. I think Okongwu was really good. Can the Pacers get him after Porzingis got there? is he available? He makes more in the MLE, though, so salary would have to go to the Hawks. I don't know why the Hawks would want to trade him. He's good. Daniel Gafford just got an extension with the Mavs that was conveniently basically the maximum extension he could get and still be instantly trade eligible. I believe it's like right on that line. But it was 3 years, I believe, right in the Rays range. They have Cooper Flagg. They have Derek Lively. They have Anthony Davis, who I typed as Anthony David. They have PJ Washington. They have Dwight Powell. They're big. That's good. That's their identity. That's fine. That'll make them good on defense. What's the long-term plan with Gafford when Lively's good and will eventually be extended on the same deal as Daniel Gafford, right? Whew. Interesting one there. I just saw a picture of Myles Turner and that Jake Fisher report on my phone and was confused what was going on. Okay, Daniel Gafford is one too, at least like, but they have to send out salary for that. Isaiah Stewart, he's a good player, but he's hurt a lot. Jalen Duren's there. They had interest in Turner, so clearly, or at least that was reported. So clearly that Detroit is looking at their center position. I think he's a good player. These are not inspiring names. They're a little more sad stopgappy type, but like, what is Yusuf Nurkic doing on the Jazz? What do the Bulls want out of Nikola Vucevic anymore? And then these last two, so those guys are all, I guess Gafford maybe is a little higher than this, or he will be in the future. Those five guys I just said, Nurkic, Vucevic, Beef Stew, Gafford, and Okongwu, all make just barely above the MLE. So it's not like a really high salary to have to go out for the Pacers. The other two guys that I typed down would require like a serious real salary going out. That's Nick Claxton, who's a good player on a bad team on a descending deal, right? What could that look like? Could they actually get an asset alongside of him, depending on the trade? Same with all these guys that are over the mid-level. And John Collins, what the heck are the Jazz doing in the front court? But you have to be like free or like assets with him. Those are just names that I'm like, yeah, I could see how they'd be available. And I see why their salary could be moved and a trade would be plausible. But I would say that the sub-MLE names, which to repeat, just so I can mostly so I can look back at this later, but still, Walker Kessler, Mitchell Robinson, Robert Williams, Wendell Carter, Brendan Clark, Kelly Olynyk, Jalen Smith, Goga Batadze, and Nick Richards. They seem more plausible because they're under the MLE. And then the free agent group of DeAndre Ayton, Al Horford, and Mo Wagner. That seems like the more likely crew with those other names being in potentially bigger deals. That's where the Pacers are. Day 3. Give it up for day 3 of free agency coming right up tomorrow on this show. In the absence of moves, we'll talk more about any reports that have come out, where the Pacers' reality is, other stuff you need to be keeping an eye on in free agency. Like we haven't talked about other internal ripple effects from this. We talked a little bit about Isaiah Jackson, or like Thomas Bryant and Enrique Freeman and all that. So much more to get to from this Myles Turner stuff and the Pacers' new reality. Thank you all for listening today. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. Reese. This podcast is on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Pacers. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you very soon.